The universe didn't care about fair fights, and neither did Commander David Grant. He'd learned that lesson 20 years ago on the frozen wastes of Titan, watching his squad hold the line against impossible odds while colonists evacuated behind them. Now, sitting in the command chair of Frontier Station Alpha, he was about to learn it again in ways that would reshape humanity's place among the stars. The transmission came through at 2:47 in the morning, crackling with interference and desperation. Grant had been reviewing supply manifests, the mundane work that filled the quiet hours between nothing and everything. His hand paused over the datapad as the voice filled the communications bay, high-pitched, trembling, speaking broken galactic standard with an accent that twisted the words into barely recognizable shapes. "Please," the voice begged. "Anyone who can hear this. We are dying. They kill us in the streets. The council will not answer." Grant straightened, his heart suddenly loud in his ears. In 3 decades of military service, he'd heard distress calls before. Training prepared you for the technical response, trace the signal, verify the source, follow protocol. Nothing prepared you for the raw terror in another being's voice when they knew death was coming. "Run that back," he said to the communications officer. "Full analysis." The young technician's fingers flew across the console. "Signal originated outside the border zone, sir. Way outside. That's council space. Council space." The words carried weight. 60 years had passed since humanity's first faster-than-light vessels ventured beyond Sol system and discovered the terrible truth. Earth was a death world, not merely dangerous, but categorically lethal to most sentient species in the galaxy. The planet's crushing gravity, corrosive oxygen-rich atmosphere, and ecosystem of apex predators had evolved humanity into something the Galactic Council found deeply unsettling. The agreement had been simple. Humans would build their colonies in the worthless systems the Council ignored, stay quiet, avoid attention, and everyone would pretend the other didn't exist. Grant pulled up the transmission data. Video footage accompanied the audio, and he immediately wished it didn't. The species calling themselves Velani looked fragile, their pale blue skin and oversized eyes giving them an almost childlike appearance. In the footage, they ran through burning streets while armored soldiers cut them down with systematic efficiency. Buildings collapsed. Children screamed. Bodies littered the ground. "The Kravix came 3 days ago," the voice continued. Grant recognized it now as belonging to the Velani woman at the center of the frame, her face streaked with ash and blood. "They said our world belongs to them now, said our species is too weak to deserve life. We sent messages to the council. They said they would deliberate. They said to wait. We have no time left." Grant reached for the priority channel before he'd fully processed the decision. Admiral Rebecca Foster's face appeared on the screen seconds later, her silver hair pulled back severely, her expression already hardening as she read his face. "Show me," she said. He transferred the data, watched her watch the footage, saw the moment her jaw tightened, the almost imperceptible shift in her posture that he'd learned to recognize over years of service together. Foster had grown up in the belt, where survival meant protecting your own because no one else would. She'd carried that philosophy through every rank she'd earned. "Get me fleet command," she said quietly. "All of them. I don't care what time zone they're in." "Ma'am, I know exactly what you're about to say, David. I know the regulations. I know the political situation. I know we're supposed to stay hidden." Her eyes met his through the screen. "I also know what happens when good people do nothing. Get me the fleet." The orders went out within minutes. Across human space, from the outer colonies to the shipyards orbiting Luna, vessels began powering up their drives. Captains rolled out of bed and rushed to their bridges. Marines checked their gear with practiced efficiency. The Terran Defense Fleet had been built for one purpose, to ensure humanity's survival in a hostile galaxy, but it had never been tested against external enemies. That was about to change. Grant transferred to the bridge of the battlecruiser, relentless, as it broke orbit from Frontier Station. Around him, the bridge crew worked with focused intensity, each member understanding the magnitude of what was happening. They were about to cross into Council territory without permission. engage in combat with a foreign power, and reveal humanity's true military capabilities to a galaxy that already feared them. There would be consequences. Some of them might not survive to face those consequences. Status report, Grant said, settling into the command chair. His executive officer, Commander Lisa Park, pulled up the tactical display. 68 ships responding to the call, sir. Everything from frigates to heavy cruisers. Admiral Foster is coordinating from the Defiant. ETA to Velani space is 7 hours at maximum burn. What do we know about the Kravix Dominion? Intercepted Council transmissions paint them as expansionist and aggressive. Military-first culture, heavy emphasis on showing strength. They control 18 star systems, and their fleet numbers somewhere around 200 warships. Grant studied the data flowing across his screens. The numbers weren't encouraging. Pull everything we have on their tactical doctrine. I want to know how they think, how they fight, what they fear. Park nodded, already working. Around them, the Relentless thrummed with power as its drives pushed toward maximum velocity. Through the viewports, other human ships fell into formation, a loose constellation of vessels that had never fought together but were united by something deeper than training. They were united by the simple fact that someone had called for help and no one else had answered. The hours crawled past. Grant reviewed tactical scenarios, studied the intercepted footage, tried to prepare for a battle against an enemy they'd never faced using ships that had only ever run drills. His crew remained focused, but he could see the tension building. They were entering the unknown, and everyone knew it. Dropping out of FTL in 30 seconds, the navigator announced. Grant gripped the armrests of his chair. All hands, battle stations. This is not a drill. The Relentless shuddered as it returned to normal space. Alarms immediately began wailing across the bridge. Contacts, Park said sharply. 41 Kravix warships in orbit around the planet. They're in siege formation. Grant's tactical display lit up with enemy signatures. The Kravix vessels were massive, dreadnoughts that dwarfed most human ships. Their hulls bristled with weapon emplacements, and their shields already glowed with power. This was exactly the kind of fight humanity had hoped to avoid. Open a channel to Admiral Foster. Foster's face appeared on the screen, her expression carved from stone. I see them, David. All ships maintain formation. Let's see if they're interested in talking before shooting. The Kravix responded first. A broad-spectrum transmission flooded across all frequencies, and a holographic image resolved itself on the Relentless's main display. The being that appeared stood perhaps 7 feet tall, its body covered in dark scales, its eyes burning with predatory intelligence. Battle scars crossed its face and chest, each one displayed like a badge of honor. I am Warlord Kreth of the Kravix Dominion, the being announced, its voice a deep rumble. You have entered Dominion territory. State your purpose immediately or be destroyed. Foster's response was immediate and cold. This is Admiral Rebecca Foster of the Terran Defense Fleet. We are responding to a distress call from Velani Colony. Stand down your forces and withdraw from this system. Kreth's expression shifted into what might have been amusement. Terran. I am unfamiliar with this species. No matter. You command 68 vessels. I command 41 dreadnoughts. Each of my ships could obliterate 10 of yours. Withdraw now or join the Velani in extinction. Grant watched Foster's face carefully. He'd served with her long enough to recognize the look that crossed her features. The same look she'd worn before ordering their forces into the meat grinder at Enceladus during the colony wars. It was the look of someone who'd already made peace with the costs. Warlord Kreth, Foster said quietly, you have 30 seconds to begin your withdrawal. After that, we will consider all Kravix vessels hostile targets. Kreth threw his head back and laughed, the sound reverberating through the transmission. You dare threaten me. I have conquered 23 worlds. I have burned civilizations to ash. Your pathetic fleet is nothing. 20 seconds. I will enjoy watching your ships burn. 10 seconds. Your arrogance will cost you everything. Foster raised a hand. All ships weapons free. Show them what death worlders do to bullies. The channel went dead. For one crystalline moment, everything hung suspended. Then Grant gave the order he'd trained his entire life to give. Fire! The Relentless's railguns opened up in sequence, magnetic accelerators launching tungsten projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. Around them, the human fleet did the same, and space suddenly filled with metal traveling fast enough to punch through planets. The first volley hit the Kravik's formation like a meteor storm. Grant watched the tactical display as their shields flared and buckled. One dreadnought's defensive screen collapsed entirely, and three tungsten rods hammered through its hull, detonating deep inside the ship. Secondary explosions rippled along its length as ammunition stores ignited. Direct hit, Park reported. Enemy ship is venting atmosphere. They're losing power. But the Kraviks were already responding. Brilliant beams of focused energy lanced out from the dreadnoughts, plasma weapons that could melt through armor in seconds. A human frigate took a direct hit and simply ceased to exist, torn apart by energies meant for much larger vessels. Evasive maneuvers, Grant ordered. Don't give them a clean shot. The Relentless banked hard, pulling 7 gravities as it twisted through space. Around Grant, his crew worked through the acceleration, their bodies conditioned by evolution and training to handle forces that would liquefy most species. This was the advantage of being from a death world. What killed others merely hurt humans. More plasma beams cut through space, but human ships danced between them. Their targeting computers, designed by engineers who understood three-dimensional combat in ways most species didn't, tracked optimal firing solutions while maintaining impossible maneuvers. They moved like predators, like pack hunters coordinating without needing orders. Target that command ship on our starboard side, Grant said. Full barrage. The Relentless's weapons spoke again. This time, they focused everything on a single target. Tungsten rounds moving at relativistic velocities slammed into the Kravik's vessel, one after another, each impact releasing energy equivalent to small nuclear weapons. The dreadnought's shields held for 3 seconds. Then they failed. The ship broke apart, its spine snapping under the kinetic assault. Escape pods began launching, desperate survivors fleeing the dying vessel. But there were still 40 Kravik ships, and they were adapting. Grant watched as the enemy fleet shifted formation, clustering together to provide overlapping fields of fire. Smart. It meant human ships couldn't isolate targets as easily. It also meant they couldn't maneuver as freely. All ships, Pattern Delta, Foster's voice cut through the fleet channel. Let's see how they handle chaos, Pattern Delta. Grant felt his pulse quicken. It was one of their most aggressive doctrines, designed for exactly this kind of numerical disadvantage. Instead of maintaining formation, human ships would break apart, each vessel acting independently, creating dozens of threats the enemy had to track simultaneously. The human fleet scattered. Ships dove toward the planet's gravity well, using it to slingshot around at higher velocities. Others climbed above the orbital plane, attacking from unexpected angles. A few accelerated directly toward the Kravik's formation, playing chicken with vessels 10 times their mass. Kreth's voice crackled across the transmission. What madness is this? No species fights this way. But humans did, because humans had evolved on a world that punished the weak and rewarded the bold. Because human military doctrine had been forged in conflicts where overwhelming firepower wasn't an option. Because sometimes chaos was the only weapon you had. Grant guided the Relentless through the maelstrom, his crew executing maneuvers that would be impossible for species that didn't regularly experience high gravity. They fired on targets of opportunity, coordinated with nearby vessels through rapid burst transmissions, and refused to give the Kraviks a moment to breathe. Another human ship died, then another. Each loss hit Grant like a physical blow, but he couldn't afford to dwell on it, not while the battle raged. The destroyer Vigilant took a plasma beam through its engineering section and detonated in a brilliant flash. The frigate Striker collided with a damaged Kravik's vessel, both ships erupting into superheated plasma. But they were winning. Grant could see it in the tactical data. 27 Kravix ships destroyed or disabled. The enemy formation was collapsing, individual vessels trying to retreat while others attempted to maintain the fight. Their coordination was breaking down. "Sir," Park said urgently, "enemy flagship is broadcasting on all channels." Grant brought up the transmission. Warlord Kreth's face appeared again, but the arrogance was gone. His eyes were wide, his scales darker with what might have been fear. "Cease fire," Kreth said. "We surrender." "Please cease fire." Foster's voice came through immediately. "All human vessels, stand down. Do not fire on ships attempting to withdraw." The battle ended as suddenly as it began. The remaining 14 Kravix ships began accelerating away from Velani's space, their drives straining as they fled. Grant slumped back in his chair, suddenly aware of how tightly he'd been gripping the armrests. Around him, his crew was silent, processing what they'd just survived. "Damage report," Grant said quietly. Park's voice was thick. 13 ships lost, 11 heavily damaged. Casualty estimates are still coming in, but initial numbers suggest over 2,000 dead. 2,000 people. 2,000 families who would receive notification that their loved ones weren't coming home. Grant closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight settle on him. Command meant carrying that weight. It never got lighter. "Sir," the communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet. Audio only. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was the same one from the original distress call, but transformed. Where before it had been filled with desperation, now it trembled with something else entirely. "Terran ships, this is Velani colony. Is it true? Did you really come? Did you save us?" Grant opened a channel. "This is Commander David Grant of the battlecruiser Relentless. Yes, we came. The Kravix forces have withdrawn. You're safe now." Silence. Then, "Why? We are nothing to you. We sent the message to anyone who would listen, never thinking anyone actually would. Why did you cross the galaxy for strangers?" Grant thought about how to answer that. About explaining humanity's values to a species they'd never met. About putting into words the simple fact that when someone screamed for help, decent people responded. "Because you asked," he said finally. That was enough. The dropships descended through Velani atmosphere 12 hours later, carrying medical teams and relief supplies. Grant went down with the first wave, wanting to see firsthand what they'd fought for. The capital city was a ruin. Buildings lay collapsed, streets were cratered from orbital bombardment, and the acrid smell of smoke hung thick in the air. But the Velani were alive. They emerged from shelters and basements, these small, fragile beings who would die on Earth within hours, and they stared at the humans with something approaching awe. Grant understood. Humans looked like predators because they were predators. Forward-facing eyes, visible canine teeth, bodies built for violence. To species like the Velani, humans must have seemed terrifying. A Velani female approached him cautiously. She was even smaller than Grant had expected, barely reaching his chest. Her oversized eyes studied him with intelligence and fear in equal measure. "Your Commander Grant?" she asked in heavily accented standard. "That's right, and you are." "Lyra, I sent the distress call." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "I never thought anyone would answer. The Council has always said they would protect us, but when the Kravix came, they did nothing. They said they needed time to deliberate while my people died in the streets." Grant knelt down to her level, making himself less imposing. "The Council failed you. We won't. If you'll accept it, Earth is offering formal protection to your species. We'll station ships here, help you rebuild, and make sure the Kravix never come back." Lyra's eyes glistened with moisture. "Why would you do this? What do you want from us?" "Nothing. We're doing it because it's right." She stared at him for a long moment, then did something Grant didn't expect. She stepped forward and wrapped her thin arms around him in what he recognized as an embrace. Her whole body trembled. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for coming when no one else would." Grant carefully returned the embrace, aware of how fragile she felt. Around them, other Velani were approaching the human relief teams, hesitant but hopeful. The work of rebuilding was just beginning. News of the battle spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Within days, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss the implications. Ambassador Torvin, representative of the Minari Collective, stood before the assembled delegates and delivered a report that would change everything. The humans had revealed themselves, not as the primitive species the Council had assumed would remain confined to their death world, but as a military power capable of defeating one of the galaxy's most feared empires. And unlike the Kraviks, the humans weren't interested in conquest. They were interested in protection. This creates an unprecedented situation, High Chancellor Vian announced, his crystalline form pulsing with agitation. They violated our space, engaged in combat without authorization, and now refuse to acknowledge our jurisdiction. They also saved an entire species from genocide while we deliberated, Councillor Reth pointed out. Perhaps we should consider what that says about our own response times. The debate raged for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. Humanity was a force that couldn't be ignored or contained. The question wasn't whether to engage with them, but how. Meanwhile, requests flooded into human space from species across the galaxy. Small civilizations, weak civilizations, species that had been bullied and exploited for generations. They all asked the same question. Could the Death Worlders protect them too? Admiral Foster stood in the Situation Room on Luna, reviewing the flood of incoming messages. Grant was there too, having been recalled from Velani space to help coordinate humanity's response. Around them, Earth's military and political leadership wrestled with a decision that would define their species' future. Over 500 requests in the last 72 hours, Foster said, pulling up the data. Species we've never heard of, begging for our protection. They're calling us the Guardians. Did you know that? The galaxy's protectors. Can we actually do this? Grant asked. Can we spread ourselves thin enough to protect all of them? President James Mitchell answered, his weathered face serious. The question isn't can we, David, it's should we. Taking on this role means committing humanity to a path we can't easily reverse. It means making enemies. The Kraviks won't be the last empire that objects to our interference. The Kraviks attacked us at Velani, Foster pointed out. They made their choice. The question is what we do about the others. Grant thought about Lyra, about the way she'd looked at him with hope in her eyes, about all the other species out there who had no one to turn to when violence came calling. We spent 60 years hiding because we were afraid of how the galaxy would see us. But maybe it's time they learned that Death Worlders aren't just dangerous. We're also loyal. We protect those who can't protect themselves. Mitchell studied him carefully. You understand what you're proposing. We'd be putting ourselves directly between predators and prey across hundreds of star systems. We'd be making humanity the shield for half the galaxy. Yes, sir, I understand perfectly. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. The Terran Protection Initiative became official policy. Any species facing extinction or systematic violence could petition Earth for protection. If their case was verified, humanity would respond. The galaxy was about to learn that Death Worlders had teeth, and they weren't afraid to use them. But the Kravik's dominion wasn't finished. In the throne room of their capital world, Emperor Draxus received news of the defeat with cold fury. His greatest warlord humiliated, his fleet scattered, his empire's reputation in tatters. All because of a species no one had taken seriously. Send word to every vassal state, Emperor Draxus commanded. Every allied empire, every species that owes us tribute. The humans have revealed themselves as a threat to galactic order. They must be dealt with permanently. His advisors exchanged worried glances. One brave soul spoke up. My emperor, the humans defeated Warlord Kreth's entire battle group. Perhaps a diplomatic approach. Silence. Draxus's voice was ice. The Dominion does not negotiate with primitives. If we cannot defeat them in open battle, we will strike where they're vulnerable. Prepare an assault fleet. We are going to Earth itself. The invasion force that assembled over the next 3 weeks represented the largest military mobilization in Kravik's history. 215 warships, carrying hundreds of thousands of soldiers, all focused on a single objective. Break humanity's will by destroying their homeworld. Intelligence networks across the galaxy picked up on the preparations. Warnings flooded into human space. Admiral Foster called an emergency meeting of Fleet Command and laid out the situation with brutal clarity. "They're coming for Earth," she said. "Every ship they have, every soldier, everything. This is about revenge and dominance. They want to show the galaxy what happens when you defy the Kraviks." Grant studied the force projection data. "We can't match their numbers. Even pulling back every ship from every colony, we're outnumbered 3-1. "No," Foster's voice was steel. "We don't pull back. We call everyone home. Every ship, every soldier, every asset we have. Earth is humanity's heart. We defend it with everything we've got, or we die trying." The word went out. Across human space, vessels turned toward home. Colonial defense forces, exploration ships, merchant vessels retrofitted with weapons, everything that could fly and fight, began the journey to Sol system. This would be humanity's stand. When the Kravik's fleet arrived, they found Earth defended by over 300 ships and a ring of orbital fortresses that bristled with weapons. Emperor Draxus stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the defenses with satisfaction. The humans had gathered their entire military in one place. Perfect. He would destroy them all at once. "All ships," he announced. "Begin the assault. Leave nothing alive." The Battle of Sol began with a simultaneous volley from both sides that turned near-Earth space into a storm of energy and metal. Kravik's plasma beams carved through human ships, while railgun rounds punched through alien hulls. The orbital fortresses added their firepower massive batteries that had been designed specifically for this scenario. Grant commanded a defensive sector from the Relentless, coordinating a dozen ships in a desperate dance of survival. The Kraviks kept coming, wave after wave, their ships absorbing horrific damage but continuing to press forward. This wasn't about tactics anymore. This was about will. A Kravik's dreadnought broke through the defensive line and began descending toward Earth's atmosphere. Grant watched in horror as its weapons charged, targeting population centers. "Intercept that ship," he ordered. "I don't care what it takes." The Relentless and 4 other vessels pushed their drives past safe limits, racing to catch the descending dreadnought. They opened fire at point-blank range, pouring everything they had into its shields. The dreadnought returned fire, its beams tearing through the frigate horizon and crippling the destroyer Adamant. But the shields failed. Grant gave one more order. "Ram it, full power to engines." His crew didn't hesitate. The Relentless accelerated, becoming a missile of metal and determination. At the last second, Grant activated the ship-wide channel. "It's been an honor serving with you all." The impact was catastrophic. Both ships erupted into a fireball visible from Earth's surface. But the dreadnought's descent was stopped, its burning remains tumbling harmlessly into the ocean instead of obliterating a city. Across the battle space, similar scenes played out. Human ships sacrificing themselves to protect their world, crews fighting to their last breath. The Kraviks had expected a military victory. What they got was a lesson in what happened when you threatened a death world species home. Admiral Foster, commanding from the orbital Fortress Prime, watched the tactical display with grim determination. They were losing ships, losing people, but the Kraviks were losing more. Their formations were breaking apart. Their coordination was failing. And most importantly, they were realizing that humans would never surrender, would never retreat, would fight until the last ship was destroyed. Emperor Draxus watched his fleet disintegrate around him and felt something he'd never experienced before: genuine fear. These humans fought like demons, like creatures that valued death in battle over survival. Every ship he destroyed seemed to inspire 2 more to fight harder. This wasn't war as he understood it. This was something primal and terrifying. "Recall all forces," he ordered suddenly. "Full retreat." But the humans weren't done. Foster's voice cut across all frequencies. "They came to our home. They tried to kill our people. Don't let them escape to try again." The human fleet pursued. Ships that should have been barely functional continued fighting, their crews working through injuries and damage that would have crippled other species. They hunted down the fleeing Kravix vessels one by one, showing no mercy to those who had shown none to the Velani. Emperor Draxus's flagship was the last to fall. Surrounded by a dozen human vessels, shields failing, hull breached in multiple locations, he finally understood the truth. The humans weren't just survivors from a death world. They were the apex predators of a planet that had spent 4 billion years perfecting the art of violence, and he had made the catastrophic mistake of threatening their young. The explosion that consumed his ship marked the end of the Kravix dominion as a galactic power. The surviving vessels surrendered unconditionally. The war was over. Humanity had paid a terrible price. 53 ships destroyed, thousands dead, and Earth itself had come within hours of invasion. But they had won, and in winning, they had sent a message to the entire galaxy. In the weeks that followed, the Galactic Council finally acknowledged reality. High Chancellor Vian himself traveled to Earth for the first formal contact between humanity and the Council. He stood in Geneva, in a specially built chamber with Earth-normal gravity that left him visibly struggling, and delivered a historic address. For too long, the Council has failed in its primary duty, to protect the innocent, Vian said. We debated while species died. We deliberated while civilizations burned. Humanity has shown us a different path. They acted while we talked. They sacrificed while we calculated. Today, we formally recognize the Terran Protection Initiative and invite humanity to join the Galactic Council as full members. Admiral Foster accepted on behalf of Earth. We'll join, but understand this. We won't abandon the species we've pledged to protect. If the Council fails them again, we'll act again. That's not a threat. It's a promise. The galaxy was changing. Over the following months, dozens of species accepted Earth's protection. Human ships took up stations in systems that had known only fear and exploitation. Human engineers helped rebuild shattered worlds. Human diplomats negotiated treaties that finally gave smaller species a voice. And on Velani colony, Lyra stood with her people and watched human ships in orbit, knowing they would stay until the Velani could defend themselves. She thought about the question that had haunted her since the battle. Why had the Death Worlders come when no one else would? The answer, she'd learned, was simple. Because humans knew what it meant to be prey. Their entire evolutionary history was a story of fighting against impossible odds, of protecting the pack, of refusing to abandon their own. They'd evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day, and instead of making them cruel, it had made them fierce in their loyalty. The galaxy had feared Death Worlders because they were dangerous. Now it was learning that Death Worlders were also something else entirely. They were guardians. And once a human decided you were worth protecting, they would stand between you and the darkness, no matter the cost. David Grant's sacrifice at Sol became legend. His name was spoken alongside other heroes who had given everything to protect Earth. But his true legacy wasn't his death. It was the principle he died defending. That power came with responsibility, and humanity would never hide while others suffered. The universe still didn't care about fair fights. But now, when predators came calling, prey had somewhere to turn. They had the Death Worlders. They had humanity. And that changed everything.